You know, I'm sure people are walking in here tonight and thinking, what the hell have we got a blind guy talking about vision? But I hope you'll find in the time we're together that we're going to share some vision thoughts. But I'd like to do something first. And when I ask this question, don't raise your hands because it doesn't do me any good. I'm curious to first find out why some of you are here. Somebody talk to me about why you've chosen to come tonight. Anybody? Don't.
I'll tell you.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been to several of these, and they're fantastic. So
Yeah.
I'm expecting that this will be fantastic.
What you mean is, Tom, don't stiff,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's a great reason. Anybody else? A thought?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am. Over here.
I've been diagnosed with wet macular degeneration.
With wet.
Wet.
Okay.
Now having shots in the eye.
Yeah, well, you
I'm
know,
scared to death.
well, ma'am, it's important that you know, and I know that your docs have told you, and if they haven't, our docs here will. Wet, at least now, is quite controllable, and there's 3 new drugs in the pipeline right now that are going to gain FDA approval in the next 2 years, and the chances of really controlling wet are wonderful. So you should feel excited about it. There's also a brand new treatment using nutraceuticals where they're matching the cell type. They take blood and they create cyber cells, and those cyber cells then are kept in a jar, basically. And the theory is by trying certain nutraceuticals, and you know those are over the counter, you find out which nutraceutical works well on your particular cyber cell. So it's like personalizing the involvement, and it's a wonderful treatment. So to answer your question, hey, you know what? You're not going to be joining the world of the blind, I can tell you that. And it's wonderful. Anybody else got a reason?
I saw your bio online.
Did it scare you? How'd you feel about that?
I found inspiring.
Oh.
I want to hear your wisdom and
Oh,
how
thank you for saying that.
can be such an inspiring person despite the disadvantage like this.
You know what I love? You happen to have a small accent, so I want you to travel with me all the time because you sound smart.
Thank you. I loved you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Thoughts?
I'm a new graduate from optometry school, and I got my master's in public health, and I just feel like being able to hear your point of view on things would be really helpful.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Massachusetts at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences.
Is that Worcester?
Yep, in Worcester.
You know, I grew up in Boston
Oh, nice.
and West Roxbury,
Okay.
and right away you started to talk, and Jesus, my accent started to come right back.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine from Boston today. His name is Bill Hannon. He's been my best friend since we were 10. And we got talking about all the times we've been together. And he said to me, do you remember, with that, he said, do you remember that you never had a French fry until you were 14? I said, yeah. He said, you know why? I said, why? He said, I stole them. I said, you took from a blind guy? He said, yeah, and I got away with it too. I'll take one more. Anybody else have a thought? Oh, 2 of you. Yes, ma'am. In the corner? Do I point okay? Because, you know, I worry about it. Yeah.
I have a stroke in my eye, I found out, and that was the first time I heard it.
Ah.
And then I had another stroke, regular stroke people has it. And that kind of little bit scares me that if something happens, what would be. So right now, my one eye is good and one eye is kind of a bad, so
Well,
I'm here for you.
I know that I'm not in any way supposed to talk about the Institute specific, but we have some wonderful folks here, and not only are we glad you're here tonight, but we are here to serve your needs, and I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm going to, and one more on this side, I think.
I wanted to ask you,
Yes, ma'am.
how long you can control with the drops the eye nerve pressure so not to become glaucoma?
We're doing really well with glaucoma, and I happen to be somebody, I'll tell you in a little while more about it, but who had glaucoma. And I got it before the drops came. The products made by a number of the pharma companies, particularly right here locally, Allergan, Falumigan, and Comigan, that's kind of the glaucoma standard. But we've also here in the Institute got 2 researchers, right, Janice?
Yes.
That are doing really important work in glaucoma with vein intervention and a number of other things that are allowing patients to feel pretty good about it. I can say that I don't want to go as far as to say it's completely controllable, but it is clearly treatable, and you should do well. And I'll look forward to seeing you a couple of years from now when those eyes are still working just fine.
You just all your life take the drops, eye drops.
Yes, you will be on drops forever unless there's a miracle that happens here. But yeah, and maybe that brings me to the place I want to begin some conversation. Dana noted that I've never met an ugly person unless they wanted to be. And that is largely true, but there are so many things I wish I could see. I would love to see a rainbow. I'd love to see a sunset. It would mean the world to me. My daughter Blythe, stand up Blythe. She doesn't like it when I do that. That's my daughter Blythe in the back. I'd love to see that beautiful face. She is beautiful. See, now don't tell her that. You know what I'm worried about right now? I've got a microphone. Yeah. I've got a microphone on and she's got my wallet. This could be a bad night all the way around. I'd love to see her beautiful face. My eyes on the world are Blythe's eyes for me, and my wife, wonderful Patty. Patty and I just celebrated our 50th anniversary last week. And and Patty looks a lot younger than I do. But our 50th anniversary, and I've thought about how Patty has been my eyes on the world. And that makes vision, for me, to think about in your lives, incredibly significant. And I want to frame this conversation on trying to make you think about that, about the significance of your vision. And the only way I can get there, having not been able to see, is to take you into other senses for a little bit that matter to me. So Dana mentioned that I'm a runner and a triathlete, an old one, but a runner and triathlete. And for years and years, I took this beautiful dog and I would run on the beach at home in Palos Verdes, where we live. Now, on my beach, first we would leave home at 5 in the morning, and the dog can see perfectly at night, and we would jog down the long road that led from our house to the Redondo Beach, and the dog I'd never run into a rut or a bump. He could see it all. And we'd get to the top of the beach, and then you'd hear it, the sound of the ocean. Now, what's interesting about that is that there are 15 different kinds of waves that you can learn to hear. Some of them are waves that come in at low tide, and this is when the wave sweeps over the land, and it's a dull roar, I was on the Bob Hope tour years ago, and I heard artillery, and that sounds like an artillery barrage. At high tide, the waves come together without going sand, and it's as if Muhammad Ali is fighting Joe Frazier, you know? There are body punches. On that particular beach, on Redondo, there are 11 different textures of sand. If you're running in bare feet, there are 11 different textures of sand. And there are over 50 kinds of birds. I don't know all their names, but you can hear them. And up on the cliffs above the beach, there's a restaurant. It's not there now, but it was called Millie's. And every morning when we'd run, you could smell at 6 o'clock hot, brewed coffee, and it'd mix with bacon and eggs and blueberry muffins. And that smell would drift down and blend with eucalyptus and lilac from the land and mock orange blossom and weed and kelp. And it would create a sensorial explosion, right? And then at the 4-mile mark of the run was about 5 miles, the dog would begin to pick up the pace, and he breathes, when we do this, he would breathe 4 times for every one of mine. And we'd get into a rhythm. And I'd have his harness, you can see it, in my hand, and it would be like being on the end of a ski tow, on a boat. And the pace, and at the end, at certain times of the year, sea lions come in, and you could hear them barking. And they would become like our Olympic audience, as we would run to the end of the beach. And then on summer days, I would take his harness and leash off and his collar, and we'd swim out maybe 300 yards from shore, just beyond the surf line. This was before we had great whites out there. Swim out about 300 yards beyond the surf line, and I can remember rolling over on my back just as the sun was piercing through, and you could feel the ray of the sun on your face, and I could hear the dog breathing and swimming in circles around me, and then I'd put my hand on his neck, and he would swim me back, and he would automatically go to where his harness and leash was on the ground, and we'd put them back on and walk home and have breakfast with Patty. Now, the question is, how does this relate to you? Well, we've learned over time that vision is by far the most critical sense. If you start to think about it, there's been studies done. The American Academy of Ophthalmology did a study, and it's a fascinating study. The question was asked, how important is sight? And the second part of the question was, what are you most afraid of in life? Well, first, 85% of the people asked said that sight by far was the most important sense. But here's the one that I was interested in. The second question was, what are people most afraid of? Now, I would think that you'd hear them say things like, I'm afraid of ALS or stage 4 cancer or whatever it might be that would be a terminal illness. But the conversation came back that basically what they were most afraid of was the loss of vision. So when my friend back here talked about glaucoma drops, and our lady over here talked about wet Mac, these become, don't they, ladies, substantial fears. Substantial fears. And these are fears that are hard to explain to anybody else, right? So the loss of vision is critical, and the significance of vision and how it affects your life is just as critical. So, another experiment. Don't raise your hands. I want people to take a beat and tell me what it is in life that they love to look at. Who's got something that jumps out at you like you say, wow, I just love that. Who's got one?
My granddaughter.
Oh, home run, Janice. Home run. Janice and her granddaughters. Janice is the greatest grandmother. She loves travel, and she's incredible with your granddaughters. Yeah, seeing the faces of those granddaughters. In fact, what's your favorite expression, Janice, with them? Is it a smile? Is it a certain gleam in their eye? What is it?
I walked into a room and they just come running to me, Grandma! I mean, who gets a greeting like that?
Well, I know your husband, Mark. I've seen him do that. But how great is that? Anybody else? Thoughts about things that touch you as a sighted person?
Nature,
Oh, nature. What's your favorite thing?
flowers.
Flowers. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm sorry?
Animals.
You're an animal person. Well, this guy over here is about as good as you get. So animals, flowers, grandchildren. Anybody else?
Clouds.
Yeah. That's something I've always wondered about. What the hell is that? I mean, this is my friend Betty White, the famous actress, is one of my best friends, and Blythe's grandmother. And she's one of these people, because of being an actress, who can describe things, but even Betty can't describe a cloud. Anybody able to tell me what a cloud is?
Well, it depends what kind of.
Oh, geez, we got a scientist in here. Okay. So, ma'am, it depends. But I mean, is there a particular look that a cloud has? What shape are they?
Different.
All different shapes. And you guys get to study them. There's a famous poem by Shelley. I love good poems. I bring fresh showers for the thirsting flowers to the lakes and the streams. I bear fresh shade for the leaves when laid in their noonday dreams. From my wings are shaken the dews that waken the flowers every one. And in a cavern under is fettered the thunder that struggles and howls with fits. I mean, it's just a beautiful poem about clouds. And for me, that's about as close as I get, right? Reading things that connect me to the world you live in and the world you treasure. And here at the Institute, and I know I'm not advertising Janice, here at the Institute, we're about protecting vision. You're here because you've heard that there are a lot of folks working around here that care about that. Protecting vision. Let me try one more concept. So, a few years ago, my daughter Blythe, the pretty blonde girl who won't forget you said she was pretty, by the way, she's available if anybody has fellow sisters. Just keep it in mind, would you? So she's going to hate me now.
How could she be available? She's spectacular.
Oh, God, that's going to cost me even more. So a few years ago, I was invited to give a speech on a cruise and then in Florence, in Italy. And Blythe came and brought her close friend, who at the time was a PhD candidate, an art candidate, in PhD in art, like Janice over here. And she spoke fluent Italian. And so, at the time this came up, I knew I had to give the speech, but I said to Patty, I said, listen, the idea of going to Florence is something I'd love to do, but the art means nothing to me. I said, why don't I go to Scotland and play golf, and then we'll meet in London and see some theater and stuff. And she said, no, we need somebody to carry the suitcases. So we went on the cruise, and I did my speech, and we started in Rome, and we were in the Sistine Chapel, and Blythe and Amy and Patty were just in awe looking at the frescoes and all the things that Michelangelo took 15 years to do on the ceiling. And I felt the gravitas of the place, the holiness of the place, but it wasn't, again, it was like another cathedral. We're going to France in September for our 50th anniversary, and I've already been counting the cathedrals that she's going to drag my butt through, So we finished with Sistine, and we toured Rome for 3 days. Then we went on to Florence, and the first thing, obviously, you notice is the David in the square. And we drank too much wine one night, and we snuck in so I could touch the foot of the David, which was really good. And then we ended up the next day in the Firenze. And in the Firenze Museum, there are many of the great masters' sculptures. And Blythe and Amy and Patty are just in awe as they're looking at these things. And I'm sort of thinking, geez, you poor, can I use this word? You poor blind bastard. I mean, you're here, you're looking, they're looking at the, and God is not going to allow you to see this stuff. And Amy, Blythe's friend, saw a guy that was dressed in formal clothes, and she thought, well, he must have something to do with the museum. And she said, Signore Luiceco, my uncle. My uncle is blind. Well, it turns out he was the curator. And 5 minutes later, I wasn't blind anymore. He took me behind the ropes, and I began to touch the great master's works. I touched the Moses and felt the full beard and the way the commandments were positioned in his hands, the tablets. I saw the slaves, the dying slave, prostrating himself. You could feel, it was almost as if you could feel the dropping of his flesh, the wrinkles, the angles that his body was set at. And then the rebellious slave. This guy was yoked. This guy was, And you could count every striation, every muscle group. It was amazing. And then I saw the Bacchus. I came from a family. My father was abusive. I can still picture the sound of his fists hitting my mother. He was an abusive drunk. And yet when he wasn't drunk, for me, he was a giant. I mean, he did incredible things for me. He would take me to Red Sox games and introduce me to Ted Williams. He designed the first beep ball for blind people to play ball with. He owned Irish pubs. And when I was born blind, he raised $3 million in 2 weeks in 1947. That was a lot of money from bookies and prize fighters. In fact, one of the people who gave money was a fellow named Joe McGinnis. And Joe McGinnis turns out to have been the head of the group that robbed the Brinks truck. So we never checked to find out if the bills were unmarked or marked. But the point was, he was a drunk, and as I touched the Bacchus, I felt the distension of the nose, the distortion of the chin, and yet the face that said, once upon a time, this was a handsome man. And then the distended stomach from the alcohol abuse. And I was crying by that time. And then I saw the mother and child. And Mary was extending the baby Jesus to us, away from her body, as if to say, he came here for us. And by this time, he said, Tom, I wish I could take you to Rome to see the Pietà, so you could understand what sacrifice really means. Now, this is a really out there aesthetic story, isn't it? I mean, I'm a storyteller. In Ireland, they call guys like me shanachis, the ancient storytellers. But you get the point, I think, that what I want you to walk out of here tonight with is a clear sense of the relevance of your vision. And I want you to learn to take that vision and turn it into nothing but positives in your life. How you use your vision will affect your character. It will affect how you perceive the love you feel for others. One of the worst things that people with eyes do is that you make immediate character judgments. You look at people and you define how you feel about them. I mean, for example, you looked at Blythe and said, what a beautiful girl. You might not like her. I love her, but you might not. Point is, you live in a visual world, don't you? And you make judgments about people. In fact, let's try this. Have anybody in here ever met someone where they went, oh, Jesus, yuck, and then found out they were great?
Yeah.
Anybody? You did?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Oh, there was a couple people that.
Now, speak up. I want them to know that you hated someone. Come on.
I don't know if I hated them.
Well, you sort of did.
But you see someone and the way they speak to someone else might not be how you would treat someone or how you hope you would treat someone else.
Right.
But you don't know the background, and lo and behold, 3 weeks later you run into this person in a totally different situation, and all of a sudden you forget all about that other impression you had because you didn't know what the story was.
It's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, when Dana said at the beginning of this, she said, Tom's never met an ugly person unless they wanted to be. The greatest part about being blind is that I've never labeled anyone. I kind of allow people to bring me to where they are in order to draw a conclusion about how I feel about them. And that's one of the positives about being blind. That's one of the strengths. But it is interesting about the label issues. Anybody else feel that they've ever fallen into that trap of labeling people?
Yes, I'm here and I'm not going to raise my hand.
Oh, good. Who the hell did you label?
So I work at Hoag in Irvine,
Right,
and a man came in today for a doctor's appointment.
right.
He was in the wrong building. He had a really dark suntan. Caucasian guy, a lot of sun.
Okay,
But he was covered in tattoos. Up to his hairline, all over his face. He had on a short sleeve shirt. And it was so easy for me to think that he was a ne'er-do-well of sorts. I know there's a better way to say that, but
no, you did well.
I could have been put off very easily by his tattoos.
Right,
And he was a gentle giant. He was about 6'4", I would say. I helped him to the point, I haven't told my sweet husband this yet, but I helped him to the point that after he made it across the street to the hospital, he came back to thank me because his car was in our parking lot
oh.
and brought me a bouquet of flowers from the gift shop.
No.
But it was so funny because
May I just suggest, the best thing you could do is tell your husband.
well, he's here with me tonight.
Oh.
He just heard the story, but it was the
Yeah, attaboy.
It was the wildest story. I mean, he needed to get within 5 minutes across wide Sand Canyon, which has, 4 lanes in each direction. And our little, I call it the buggy, our little electric cart pulled up. Just timing was everything. He jumped in it. He made it across the street to his doctor's appointment. And I did nothing. All I did was kind of get him to where he had to go, and it was coincidental that the buggy pulled up.
What do you do for Hoag?
I am in a role called outpatient care coordination. I'm kind of a patient experience
I,
person.
ma'am, I can tell just listening to you, you're an experience.
Well, Tom, you would not have believed these tattoos. I mean, a lot of people, maybe they have it up to the neck, but it was all over his face, every square inch of his arm. And he was older and attractive. He wasn't overweight,
Yeah,
he wasn't
yeah.
sloppy, he wasn't rude. But it would have been so easy to jump into that groove and just think of him as, whether I would blow him off or whatever it would be. 'Cause
I just got my first, I'm 72, and for my 70th birthday, my son, Tom, talked me into getting an Irish Claro ring tattoo on my shoulder, and he got one on his elbow, so that when I walk with him, the two tattoos are connected. What an experience. And now he thinks now Dad, he calls me dude sometimes. Dude, I think you ought to tat out. Oh no, I don't. I think this is it, Tom. I think we've gone as far as. This is a great conversation, isn't it, about labeling? So there are favorite things to see, like my friend right here in front very quietly saying flowers. There's the label process of how we look at people. And then there's the question of how does the external concept of being able to see connect to the internal part of what it means to be a visionary. And this is the magic, I think, of life. I said to you, I've never met an ugly person unless they wanted to be. I've told you that there are 4 other glorious senses. And the wonder for each and every one of you is that you're going to preserve your vision thanks to places like this, and you can plug into the joys of all those other senses. So you're incredibly lucky. That's a marvelous thing. It's not just that Janice has her grandchildren come running to Grandma when she walks into a room, or that the room gets lit up by their smiles. It's that they jump into her arms and wrap themselves around her, right? The sense of touch. I know we're in the Me Too generation, but there's nothing better than the feeling of a hug well meant. And we've sort of distorted some of that, haven't we? Don't you think? We've, in some ways, maybe taken it too far, like all things. We've probably, I happen to be, as an example, I spent 3 or 4 times around Joe Biden. And I'm not talking about politics now, I'm talking about people. There is no way that the guy that I've hung out with ever thought about, he's the happiest married person to Jill I've ever met. So I guess I'm trying to come to balance here. I want your eyes, the vision that you're here to talk about, to dominate the way your mind operates. But I want you to begin to process the inside-out vision. So, for example, dropping the system of labels. Engaging in expanding the way you learn to listen to the values that come from what people say. Evaluating them not based on your own need, but based on actually learning to listen. And I'll share a story with you again. I told you I'm an Irish Shanachie. But this is a moment for me that really defined inside-out vision. One of the things that I'm very involved with, along with, by the way, Janice over here, the grandma, she's the reason she and Mr. Herbert, Gavin Herbert, Laurie's dad, are the reasons I am fortunate to get to spend time now here in the Institute doing some important work. But the concept of sharing that I want to get to has to do with something else that I'm very involved in. And that's, I'm chairman of a group called Trinity Care, and in my case, Trinity Kids Care. I chair a group of people that both raises money and engages with children who are dying. Now, it's easy at St. Jude's, for example, because they're about cure, aren't they? But the tough one is to engage with families when there isn't any hope for the child. You find out that these children are old souls. They evolve. It's as if, and I don't mean this in a religious sense, but it's as if God picks up the pace of life, and these kids learn more than you could ever imagine. About 3 years ago, or longer than that, I should say, 20 years ago, my daughter Blythe and Patty and our son Tom, I spent 8 years working for Good Morning America, on ABC. And my job was to travel around the world and do profiles on people doing remarkable things. And one of the things that they had me do, in this particular case, was to join a group of kids in Winter Park, Colorado, who were coming from MD Anderson to have a vacation in the snow. And these were all kids with, in this case, they were all kids with cancer. And one of the kids who had just been diagnosed was a girl named Molly Newberry, and Molly was 8 at the time, and she had a sarcoma, angiosarcoma, so brain cancer. But Molly had just been diagnosed, so she'd just begun to lose her hair. And she spent the 10 days skiing with our son, Tom. And she was a great little girl. She fell in love with my guide dog, who was a golden retriever then named Dinah. And in the second year, I wasn't assigned there, but we wanted to be involved as a family, so we went back, and by this time they had taken Molly's right leg. And so she had to learn to ski as an amputee, and so my son Tom decided he was going to ski just like Molly. The third year we went back, and by this time they'd taken Molly's other leg. And so we spent a lot of time taking Molly down the mountain on a sled. And the last night, they had a dance for the kids. And I was sitting on the side with Molly. And she said in her little Texas accent, "Hey, Tom, I want to dance." I said, "Molly, I don't think a blind guy and a girl with no legs." Molly, I don't think we're going to do that. She said, No. You pick me up, I'll drive you like a big truck. So I picked her up and we sort of staggered around the room, and we came back and we sat down. And Molly sighed, and I said, "Molly, you okay?" And she said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "I'm tired." And I said, "Well, do you want to go back and rest?" "Well," she said, "no, because I'm not sleeping." I said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, every night the angels come." And I said, "Oh, well, what do they say?" And she said, well, they say I'm going to be with them soon. And she died 3 weeks later. So I made a decision then that someday I would write the definitive book on this issue. And I spent 2 years talking to pediatric oncologists all over the world to find out what was most current in choice in therapies. And I wrote a novel that's one of my, I've been blessed to write 15 books, but this was my best work. It's called A Short Life Well Lived. And it's the story of a family going through this. But the reason I'm telling you all this is because in the program of palliative care for children that I support, we have a doc, a fellow named Glenn Komatsu, who's truly a holy man, a great doctor. And he called me about 6 months ago and he said, hey, Tom, I've got a patient, a 20-year-old woman, young woman who has a sarcoma, brain cancer, and it's pressing on the optic nerve and she's gone blind. He said, would you come down and talk with her about how to plug into her senses and while she's got time? And so I was very nervous and I thought about this and I prepared and I went down, and I think you probably already figured I'm a fairly outgoing human. And I poured out my heart to this girl about all the things that she could still do. And about 15 minutes into my diatribe, the doctor tapped me on the shoulder. He said, excuse me, Tom, would you just step outside with me for a minute? Yeah, I thought I was on a roll, but yeah. And I walked outside and he said, Tom, did you ever consider the possibility of listening? Yeah. I guess part of the inside-out vision is just that. If you're lucky enough to be able to have the external ability that you do to take in the world, you have the potential to possess the greatest gift a human being could possibly have by being transparent enough to allow yourself to deliver to the world the best of who you are inside out. And folks, that's a choice I'll never get to make. You get to make them. Because you can see. And here we preserve vision in order to give you the right to make those choices. To look at life and like our couple back here, our lady from Hogue and her husband who didn't know that she was going to get chased around by a tattooed guy. It's obvious that you came here tonight together, a married couple sharing an evening like this. That's part of the inside-out transparency. If somebody said to me, what is your greatest sadness in life? It's exactly the same thing that my greatest happiness comes from. It's my relationship with Patty. Now Patty, Janice knows Patty well. Patty has been my eyes on the world. Actually, you can assess how our marriage is doing based on whether my clothes match. When Patty is, and I know this is recorded, but when Patty is pissed off, I go out looking like Stevie Wonder. It's
You don't think we believe that, do you?
well, yeah, no, I like to say it. It makes me feel. Patty, I wish we could show you pictures of Patty. Patty is a beautiful, beautiful woman. And the amazing part of it was, when we met on Cape Cod 50 years ago. And Betty White, my wonderful great Betty White, Betty had just married her husband, Alan Ludden. They'd met on Password. And they came to Cape Cod to do summer stock. They were going to do a play at the Cape Cod Playhouse. And they were just married, so they were totally in love. And it happened that I was going to Harvard, and I needed money to stay in school because my father had left my mother, and it's a whole long story about having to play the piano and sing because that was the only way we could pay her mortgage. And so I got a job in this little club on Cape Cod, and it was right down the street from the Cape Cod Playhouse. And Alan and Betty used to come in every night after the show. And they'd order shrimp cocktail and clams and clam chowder, and they'd have a couple of drinks. And sometimes they'd get up and I'd accompany them and they'd sing. And we became instant friends. Well, I was also a single guy at that point. And at that point, if there was a beautiful girl that came in the club, I had to deal with the bartenders, you know, where they were going to tell me. So my Boston friend here, optometrist back here in the back, yeah. So the bartender came in to me one night and said, "Oh my God." He said, "There's a girl in here, Tom, she's sitting right there at the bar. This girl is like 5'11", incredible rack, nice butt and legs that go to heaven." He said, "You better figure out how to meet her." Janice just went, "Did he really say that?" It's okay, Janice, it's okay. He said, "Yeah, you better meet her." Well, the girl had had a couple of drinks, and she leaned over the bar, and she said, "Excuse me, can you play By the Time I Get to Phoenix?" I said, "Yeah, I can play that." So I played the song, and at the end of the song, she was crying. She said, "Oh, that was so beautiful." She said, "Do you mind if I ask you something?" I said, "Well, no." She said, "Do you mind if I ask how you went blind?" I said, "Well, I don't really like to talk about it." She said, "Oh, come on." I said, "Well," I said, "I was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam and got shot down and spent 6 years in the Hilton prison. And you're the first woman I've met since I got out."
Oh my God.
Betty White hears it. She said, "Young lady, he is so full of crap." And then she said, "But there's a woman who comes in here every night by herself. And she sits at the corner table." And Betty said, "I've been watching her." And she said, "If you could see her eyes look at you, you would never date anyone else." And she grabbed me by the arm and she dragged me across the club. And she said, "Young lady, what's your name?" And the girl said, "I'm Patty." And she said, "This is Tom Sullivan, sit down." And we've been married 50 years, thanks to Betty White. Point of this is, so it's our anniversary night. And we decided to go up to Santa Barbara to the Four Seasons, you know, up there. It's an incredible place for a couple, right? I mean, it's beautiful. And we were going to have dinner at a restaurant up there called the Stone House, which is just exquisite. And so Patty really wanted to dress for me. Now, Patty will always be late. I mean, she just is. No matter how much time she budgets, or I try to get her to budget, I can hear that hair dryer and that curling iron, and I know we have a major problem. But on this anniversary night, I didn't care. And when she came in, I had one thought, and it was, here is this beautiful woman. I know she's beautiful. But I wonder sometimes if she knows I know, right? And that's part of the inside-out stuff. The ability to connect who people are internally with the capacity to express and see them externally. So part of what I'm really hoping tonight is that what you'll feel as you leave tonight and go home is not only an appreciation for the capacity to see and a recognition that what goes on at a place like this, the Gavin Herbert Eye Institute, is all about providing you with hope to maintain your vision and a safety device that says we're here to compete to help you keep your vision, right? Glaucoma and macula, that's what we're here for. So the perception I have is we hope that you'll become folks in the community who decide that in a sense you're now, after a night like this, and I know some of you have been to other nights here, that in a sense, you're the, and I'm not talking about just for the Institute, that you are now ambassadors of vision. Except that I hope I've given you the secret to believe that there's two types. There's that external capacity, and I'll modestly say, I think it pales. I think it pales in comparison to the internal skill set. And I invite you to treasure the vision you have and spend your lives, even though you're mature adults, spend your lives searching for that inner spirit that allows the best of who you are to come through. Which brings me to the last point. I spent most of my early life desperately wanting to see. I not only went to a school for blind kids that I hated, but I also, my father, because of the way he was, figured that the best thing he could do was build a big high fence around my backyard. And the theory was to keep me inside the fence and keep the world outside. But down the street from where I lived, in West Roxbury, there was a baseball field, Holy Name School. And I used to listen to the sound of kids playing ball. And I desperately wanted to do that. So I would find, my father had given me a Louisville Slugger bat, autographed by Ted Williams. And I'd find rocks on the ground and throw them up in the air and try to hit them and announce myself as if I was really in the game. Wonderful thing happened. Two little boys moved into a brand new house that had just been built on the other side of my fence. And I could hear them out there in the yard, throwing a baseball back and forth. Billy and Mike Hannon, Hannon. Bill's been my best friend now, the guy who stole French fries, has been my best friend for 65 years. But I knew that at some point I had to find a way to get to him. I didn't know who he was, but I knew I wanted to meet him. I knew I had to meet him. And I remember it was May 5th, 1955. And I grabbed the chain link fence and pulled myself up, hand over hand, hand over hand, hand over hand. And I got to the top of the fence and literally leaped into space and crashed on the ground. And the two little boys came running over, and I was on the ground with the wind knocked out, and Billy Hannon, Boston over here, Billy said, "Wow," he said, "that was a gnarly fall." He said, "I'm Bill Hannon." I said, "I'm Tom Sullivan, and I'm blind." And he went, "Wow." And then this little boy said the three most important words I've ever heard. Billy Hannon said, "Want to play?" That's all. What vision does for each of you is keep you playing. Keeps you in the game of life, doesn't it? And what we want out of this series of community lectures is not only to provide you with knowledge, but to prompt you to believe that your vision has to be protected and treasured and used effectively to love and care for others. I am convinced that there are no ugly people in the world, unless they want to be. And part of the beauty of being able to see is the capacity to smile and have someone smile back. That's the goal, huh? To smile and have someone smile back so that you then start a process of communication that allows you to make a new friend, find out how to be a valuable human being in a service to others, and celebrate your own uniqueness by developing an open approach to vision, both outside in and inside out. Here's the purist. This is the purist. Sit. Good. Up. This is the purist of what it is to be alive. You see, he has only one thing in life that matters to him, Tom. And he delivers that every day with his eyes. That service to Tom. So I hope that this has been valuable for everyone. Does anybody have things? Think of me as Father Tom. One of the things about being blind is that people think you're like a priest. Jesus, they tell you everything. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Conversation about anything?
I have a question.
Okay.
So you've done really well. You married, obviously, a beautiful.
I married, as the Irish say, I married up.
Yeah, you did.
I married up.
And apparently you were able to attract her when you were,
I was hot.
right, but the thing is, you were playing a piano and not because you didn't have enough money to go to college. So,
Right.
You know, and you live in Palos Verdes, so you, like, how do you do that? Because I don't think most blind people.
Oh, that's
do
a,
as well in
ma'am,
life.
that's a great question. Thank you. You know, I'm so lucky because God blessed me with unique talents. I mean, I was Michael Landon's part, and we did Highway to Heaven, Little House on the Prairie. The 15 books, all the years with Good Morning America. They've made a movie about my life years ago called If You Could See What I Hear. The thousands and thousands of corporate speeches I've given. Patty and I just went past the $10 million mark that we've raised for blind children and their families, and now I'm trying to help Janice get a van going here in the Institute that we keep on process alive with. All that's to say, you know, I'm luckier than the blind people because I had the talent to make records and write books and make movies. And you know what's? I'll tell you an interesting thing about the acting stuff that I did. The only way I ever acted was that I had to be able to write the scripts because no one was looking for a blind guy. In fact, just a quick note. Do you remember the TV series Fame?
Sure.
Well, I loved the show, and because I'd made a lot of records and stuff, and I knew I could sing, I decided I would write a script and sell it to Fame, where I would become the voice teacher for the school, but I'd also decided I wanted to dance. And I had never danced. You know how you go to a wedding and you're supposed to, people, they laugh when I dance. I mean, it's a truly ugly thing. And but I wrote myself in as a dancer. So the producer said, you got to go see Debbie Allen and show her that you can dance. So I went in on a Saturday and she put music on. She said, all right, dude, let me see what you got. And I started to thrash around or whatever I did. And she started laughing. She said, young man, you sum up what it means to be white. No rhythm. She said, can you do anything? I said, well, what do you mean? Well, she said, can you walk? I said, well, yeah, I got here. She said, could you do a somersault? Yeah. Could you learn to do a handstand? I said, yeah, I'm sure I could. I said, I was an athlete. She said, well, can you pick me up? I said, yeah, you're little. So Debbie Allen choreographed this dance with 18 dancers and me doing these things in the middle, and it won an Emmy. So all that's to say, to answer your question, I'm the lucky blind guy because I was provided with the talent to be expressive. And also, I suppose, ma'am, to be fair, I was also provided with the guts to try. I was never afraid of failure. This is an odd way to put it, my friend back here in the back with macular, but failure is an opportunity to be better. You learn from it. My friend Lori back here, she's learned from some struggles, and in some ways, Steve and Lori, you're better for it. Maybe. Anybody else, something they want to talk about?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You started out your talk with something about what would you think that see.
Yes,
And you said a rainbow
A
and
s-
a sunset.
sunset, yeah,
And those two things are extremely colorful,
yeah.
and they are extremely hard, I would think, to describe to someone.
Yeah, I've
If
tried.
you had a question about, okay, how would you describe a cloud? Well, if you think about it, I thought, okay, how would I do that? Okay, I'd go get a big bunch of cotton,
Yeah,
and I'd pull it out, and I'd have you feel it.
okay,
And that would be using one of your other senses.
yep.
My question to you is, do you feel that you can perceive color? And if so, how?
That's a great question. There's an experiment going on in Russia right now with blind people learning to feel the heat from different colors and assessing what the color might be. But as a general statement, no. Again, being Irish, I have a horrible habit of, there's a phrase in Ireland, they say the Irish are a people who know more than they have the right to. And I literally have a horrible Irish weakness. I'll talk about anything, whether I know anything about it or not. So we were having our house painted inside, and Patty had gone to the store, and the painters were working on the living room. And when she walked in, Jesus, I was engaged in a conversation with the painter about how to mix colors, which suggests what a jerk I am. But thank you for the question, ma'am. And this lady over here had one.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand. How do you learn to, ski and golf and those things without vision? How do you do it?
Well, golf. I'm getting ready now to play in the Blind World Championships. There are 63 blind golfers, but they're all guys. I'm the only one that didn't have sight and learned to play. The other 62 are veterans or they're guys who were good players and lost their sight, but they still knew the golf swing. But the game of golf's played with a coach that lines the shots up. So if we're standing on the tee, he'll take the driver and he'll point it like this, like a rifle. And I'll put both hands on it and then step out so that my feet are square, and then he'll bring the club down and put it behind the ball and hold the face of the club square so that when I turn and swing, the face is square. And I'm a 16 handicap, which isn't too bad. It means I shoot high 80s. But my favorite golf moment, I was asked to play golf with Jack Nicklaus right after he'd won the Masters in '86. And we went to a golf course he was building, and I was so scared. I mean, a blind guy on television live is going to play golf with Jack Nicklaus. And so we were getting ready, and they had an announcer on the tee, first tee. And I said that I had to go to the bathroom, so I ran inside, and I had 2 Crown Royals on the rocks. and the announcer gets up, and he goes, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, winner of 18 majors, 2 United States amateurs, 74 tour events, the Golden Bear, Jack Nicklaus." And he hits a drive that I could hear in the air. It went out low and climbed, and I think it's still going. And then the guy goes, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, on the tee, singer, actor, songwriter, author, blind man." Tom Sullivan. Well, we were playing 9 holes. I played the first 5 holes at my absolute best. And then the wheels fell off, and I had an 8, and I had another 8. We get to the 9th hole, and I could tell that Jack had just about as much of me as he wanted. And I said, "Jack, do you have any thoughts about my swing?" Here's what he said, because he's not a funny man. He said, "Tom, the best thing I can say about your golf swing is that you never have to see it." Yeah, great, huh? Ma'am, so golf is a game played with a coach, and the beautiful blonde girl back there is my ski guide, and she is the one that's amazing. I'm a pretty good skier, and we ski all black stuff. And she calls the turns, so you'll hear her, "Dad, turn and turn, traverse the hill, and turn, bumps coming, turn." Our favorite moment together was that we skied the downhill course the day after the World Cup in Aspen. And they, you know, when they have the World Cup, they ice the snow, so it's very fast. And we went out the next morning. We were the first people on the mountain. And I said, Blythe, do you think I can ski this? And she said, yeah, Dad, but when I tell you to turn, get off your ass. And we started, and she's loud. Turn and turn and turn. Good job, Dad. And then she said, Dad, just ski. And for the next 5 or 6 minutes, she never spoke. It's as close as I've ever been to being able to see, maybe, because that, along with the art stuff in Rome, in Florence, because I was just feeling the mountain, you know. So all of the sports I love require people to be involved. The triathlons, somebody's allowed to be in the water with me when I'm swimming. You can't touch them, but they're on a board. And then I can use a tandem bike, and then we have people, you know, that run the marathon with me. Anybody else before we let you go?
I have another question, sorry to.
You already asked one.
I know. But I like to talk, I'm Irish.
Yeah, good for you. God love you.
So I'm wondering about Blythe. It sounds like she's really kind of, besides the dog, your right hand. Are you able to have an independent life, or is that something that you do full time?
No, I'm very independent. I don't live at home, I'm his assistant, your administrative assistant these days.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Tell them where you work, Blythe.
What's that?
Tell them where you work.
Oh, no, I work at home.
So she's a local right here at Hogue.
Yeah.
And Tom has really traveled all over the world independently with Baron or another one of his dogs.
Oh.
But the funny story, and I'll be really quick, years ago, Tom used to jog on with a friend, Norman Panic, remember?
Yeah.
And one day they were jogging, and Norm, who's a physician, said, you know, I don't know what's going on with my hip, but I'm having this pain in my hip.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
His jogging friend was saying, I'm having this pain in my hip. And Tom goes, well, that's because you're running on the side of your foot.
Yeah. Yeah.
He could hear it.
Yeah, I diagnosed,
He went and
yeah, he had to have surgery. I diagnosed his, like I said, I'm Irish, and I say I know something about everything. One time Blythe fell riding her horse and broke her, was it wrist or finger?
No, it was like my forearm.
Yeah, she broke her forearm. I said, there's nothing wrong. Don't worry about it. She suffered until we got it cast after about a week. Oh, okay. Anyone else? I know we've got to get you all home.
I wanted to make a comment. I'm sitting in the front row, and I watched you come in, and I watched you interacting with everybody, and I was in awe of how at ease you are and how outgoing you are, but not just that, because a lot of people like to talk and are outgoing.
The Irish one over here is lovely.
But, and I'm half Irish too.
Oh, jeez.
No, I'm half Japanese. But you put people at ease. I mean, I felt like I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I'm hearing you talking to all these people, and we know you can't see them, and you're pointing in that direction, and I thought that is inside out.
It's
That's
yes.
totally inside out.
One of the things please don't misunderstand when I say this, but when I was famous, doing concerts all over the world, you know, there'd be receptions afterwards, and there'd be long lines of people that, you know, would come up to say hello. And the greatest thing about that for me is that I'm never looking over the shoulder, you know, or nodding to get rid of that person. And so I'm plugging in with every mental and sensory skill set that I have available to try to say, I may only see you for 40 seconds, but I'm going to try to be valuable in that time. Because what happens in my life, because of being blind and being somewhat or formerly famous, I get parents and kids with disability, and they want an instant response from me about something. And they're asking really important, very, very sensitive. They want to talk about very important, very sensitive things. And the best thing about my particular life is I'm not missing it. I don't always get the answer right. And I may not be able to have as much time as I'd like. But they're going to get my best focus while they're there. And isn't that a great word for us to end on, huh? Focus. Terrific, terrific word. Anyone else? I know we've got to go. But we all, did you almost raise your hand? You did. This lady here moved her arm. I thought, oh God, she's going to put her hand up. Anybody else? Okay.
I just want to say one thing. I would be so scared if I were not having vision. I would never even try to go ski because I would be. I remember I was in Switzerland and at the top of the mountain there's like snow sport, but it's so foggy I couldn't see
Yes.
where I'm going. I refuse to do it because I have to see where I'm going.
Yeah.
So I think you're so brave.
Well,
I don't know.
the people I admire,
So
Mims,
brave.
the people I really admire. Remember I was talking about the blind golfers that had sight? Those are the men and women that I just treasure because they had sight and they had to cope. I mean, that's murder. They know colors, like you just said over here. They knew colors. They had a perception of life. One of my, Janice, I'll just share this quickly. There's a study going on here by Dr. Henry Klassen that's really important. It's using stem cells to stimulate the mitochondria, the inside of the retina. That mitochondria is basically the battery of the eye. It's what stimulates the light source to occur, the transfer of light. And Dr. Klassen is now preparing second stage, and we here believe that maybe conditions like retinitis pigmentosa and macular degeneration might get solved using these very large numbers of stem cells. And they did the first group of people, and there was a woman in the study named Kristen McDonald who I've known when she was a sighted, highly successful actress. I was doing a soap opera in New York called Search for Tomorrow, and she was doing a soap opera, The Guiding Light. And so we got to know each other then. That's 40 years ago, 35 years ago. In the course of life, she lost all of her vision, but she was selected for Henry's study here at the Institute. And they gave her, she was one of the people that got only 1 million stem cells. Some of the folks in the trial got up to 3. Now they're moving to 6 or 8 million stems. And Kristen got the cells, and I'd check with her every couple of weeks, and nothing happened. And then one morning, the phone rang, and it was Kristen. And she said, she was crying, and I said, Kristen, Jesus, what's the matter? She said, Tom, I was in the bathroom this morning, and I saw my mascara. So for my friend with macular, and my friends with diabetic retinopathy, and my friends with glaucoma, and my friends with retinitis pigmentosa, and my friends with corneal disease, there really is hope. And we like to think that maybe we're leaders in this, but around the world there is marvelous research being done, and I'm delighted that all of you have agreed. You don't know this, you've signed a piece of paper. You've agreed to be ambassadors of vision. What do you think? Think that's okay? Yes. Thank you, everybody, for a great night.